We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles McKenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip. When it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Arr, fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Joe Biden brought the Intifada to our doorstep through his immigration policies, both with open borders as well as his visa policies as well. And when Stephen Miller says immigration security is national security, this is what he's talking about, to protect us from people like this suspect. Also, this is part of a broader string of attacks we've seen here in America. We saw the governor's mansion in Pennsylvania torched simply because the governor's a Jew there, Josh Shapiro. We saw two Israeli embassy staffers executed in Washington, D.C., and now this. And also, for those criticizing Israel in its response to the Hamas terror attacks on October 7th, what is the appropriate response to a 9/11 terror attack? When you have your women raped, your children murdered, when you have paragliders come into a concert and kill almost 400 individuals with women raped next to the bodies of their dead friends, what is the appropriate response? Because if you look at what we did here in America after 9/11, between 2001 and 2021, 2001 to 2021, rather, we dropped over 80,000 bombs and munitions in response to 9/11.
Yeah.
So what is the appropriate response to a 9/11 type terror attack?
Yeah.
Welcome back to Training Tuesday. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube and our X-Basis simulcast. And as predicted, Homeland Terrorism appears to be surging, folks. America's facing a surge in this Homeland Terrorism that's really, in my opinion, more dangerous than ever before. In Boulder, Colorado, Mohammed Saliman attacked a pro-Israel event just days ago, setting people on fire and injuring 8 while screaming "Free Palestine" amongst other pro-atrocity tropes. He was in the country illegally and is now facing murder and terror charges, as it should be. In D.C., Elias Rodriguez shot 2 Israeli embassy staffers, Americans. They were outside of the Jewish Museum and shouted, "Free, free Palestine," as he was being arrested. In Palm Springs, California, a 26-year-old extremist bombed a fertility clinic because he believed having kids is evil. In Michigan, 19-year-old Air National Guard airman plotting a mass shooting at a military base for ISIS. He even used a drone to map out his attack before the FBI caught him. Angry attackers have been shooting at burning Teslas because of Elon's ties to the Trump administration. All of this on top of the ISIS-supporting terrorist that was an Army reservist that killed civilians in New Orleans on New Year's, and the Special Forces soldier that attacked the Las Vegas Trump Tower, whose motivations still are not known in that same week. Well, the FBI says it's tracking every threat and are no longer distracted by things like chasing MAGA grandmas from January 6th. But how effective are they as this new administration is still getting into place? A lot of personnel changes are happening all at the same time. And that is why my guest today is a retired FBI supervisory special agent, Chris Hinkle. He describes himself on X, and I love this. You're going to love it. A blunt force conservative, frequent radio guest and guest host, and undefeated on the constitutional debate stage. Chris, welcome to the Rob Maness Show, fellow Mississippian.
Thank you for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on. I appreciate it. I've been wanting to do this for some time because we've met about a year ago through various other venues and everything, and we follow each other, and I think we've become friends. But look, man, am I wrong? This looks like a surge to me, although you still hear the term lone wolf, but all of these guys are radicalized by external events, external individual links via the web at a minimum. But it certainly looks like a surge of not only Islamists, but majority of Islamist type homeland terrorism, homegrown and people that are coming in from outside.
Well, when you have a president that's in office like Joe Biden, and he's opening up the borders and allowing anybody to come in pretty much with no vetting whatsoever, and you've got a former Department of Homeland Security secretary that he spent more of his time trying to facilitate getting more and more people across the border. It's no surprise that these nefarious actors would come in. I think we're going to see more of this. However, I am heartened by the new tempo of the FBI under the leadership of Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. And that was evident in how quickly they identified this as terrorism. I had some conversations with someone in their circle, someone that I'm in contact with recently, and daily, just about. And that individual and other individuals assured me that decision was made quickly. Once this individual was shouting the things that he was shouting about free Palestine, and then began taking actions to harm people by setting them on fire, it was a no-brainer to call this a terrorist event. I don't think you would have seen that from the past administration. And that was evident from the type of ideological focus of that police chief there in Boulder, Colorado, who was reluctant to call it a terrorist event, even though the FBI was already on the case and moving forward. I think the SAC there, Mark McCulloch, I don't personally know him. He came in about 5 or 6 years after I did in the Bureau, but I'm impressed with how he's handled the situation. He was quick to answer questions from the podium, and he has given updates. He has had follow-up press conferences. His media person has been putting the information out there. And I think those things are going to go a long way with the citizens in earning their trust back. And that is something that the FBI has desperately got to do, is to earn that trust back from the American people.
Yeah, and I think, I was impressed at the non-ideological messaging coming from the FBI leadership and the FBI office out there in Boulder. With your contacts on the inside, as the Trump administration has come in and is now getting their feet more firmly on the ground, are folks that are are they telling you, hey, we're seeing good things by removing ideological approaches from the Bureau across the whole country? Or are people unhappy with the way the progress is going? I'm making an assumption that the field agents want to see all of that stuff gone.
The field agents are excited to have this new leadership and this new tempo. That was what my frustration was with the past administration and some of these individuals out there who were parted ways, we'll say that, from the FBI, that want to castigate Kash Patel and Dan Bongino for taking this new tempo because their cases haven't been heard and restored. But the majority of the field level individuals, even those in management, are embracing this. Now, I did get information today that recently 2 more SACs were removed from their positions. So there is a vetting process that's going on. It's going to take a while to go through this. It's not as rampant within the system, especially among the agent cadre. But you have to remember, Kash Patel was just sworn in as FBI director 100 days ago this past weekend.
Right.
So he also has to address real-time threats when he gets in. And I'm sure it's a bit overwhelming. But I do like the tempo of Dan Bongino. Wasn't my first choice for deputy director, but I do like his tempo there that, hey, if you help this guy out, if you played a role in anything in assisting this individual, this terrorist out in Colorado, we're coming after you. There'll be no stone unturned.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not lost on me that this guy was a visa overstay, Chris. All the 9/11 hijackers that succeeded were visa overstays. And I know personally how much blood, treasure, and sweat and tears and family sacrifices and losses this country has taken since 9/11. Are you concerned at all with the fact that we have these millions of people in this country now? And what's the FBI's role working with ICE and the Joint Terrorism Task Force and the interagency like the Counterterrorism Center? How is that role looking, and should we put more resources behind this effort?
Well, I feel the same way that you do. I was in D.C. that Tuesday morning on 9/11 as a young FBI agent. The bridge that Flight 77 came across and hit the Pentagon. 20 minutes before that happened, I was underneath that bridge in my 1994 Crown Victoria. And by the time I got up on 66 to go into Virginia to get home, I'd been up all night on search and arrest warrants, helping out another squad. Was when we got the call that a plane had hit the Pentagon, and our lives all changed dramatically. It's a very sensitive issue for me. I mean, it's sensitive for everybody, but two of my best friends that sat in the office next to me, from our exposure at the Pentagon and digging through that rubble pile looking for remains, have since passed away of cancer. And for the rest of my life, the World Trade Center Health Foundation checks me out every year to see if I've progressed in any type of cancer. But you know what? I am a true believer in the Constitution. I swore to protect and defend it with my life. I would do it again in a heartbeat, even knowing the outcome. And I'm pretty sure that Melissa Morrow and Mark Mikulski that sat next to me in the office would do the same. Now, as far as the individuals that are here in the United States, we've got a great working relationship blossoming between the FBI and Homeland Security. You're seeing video of them each day going out and working together to address the threats that are out there. That is something that even back in the early 2000s, we didn't really have that when Homeland Security stood up. There was a bit of competition and a bit of testing to see who was going to move forward on certain things. I'm glad to see those things have been put behind us, that they're working together. I think that's also working well with our state and local law enforcement on the task forces. And I think the more that they see these agencies working together, the people are going to regain more confidence that these law enforcement agencies are out there trying to protect them. I think the biggest concern that citizens should have right now is what is your congressman doing? What is your senator doing to help support this effort to rid these individuals, these miscreants that were led across the border by the Biden administration? When are these questions, when are our congressional leaders going to ask these same questions directly or deal with the funding with the Supreme Court and their lower courts oversteps, with the things that they're trying to do to impede the president from faithfully executing his duties to protect and defend the citizens of the United States? He is bound to faithfully execute the laws of this land. And we've got unelected bureaucrats in the judicial area that are getting in the way. And there are two groups of individuals that can do something about that. That's Congress and that's the Supreme Court. And the longer that they refrain from doing that, the lower their credibility is going to go.
Yeah, I mean, the Supreme Court just denied looking at 2 Second Amendment cases yesterday in the context of this Islamist guy that's illegal, that's overstayed his visa twice, the way I understand it. He did it twice. And in the area where the civilians were that had to help people out and keep them from dying, you couldn't carry a firearm. I mean, the Supreme Court needs to take that on, but the ones that I really hold responsible are the Congress. They have full responsibility for all the courts below the Supreme Court under the federal Constitution. It's their power. They establish them. They confirm the judges, and they fund them. And they certainly have the wherewithal to pull them up. But I haven't seen any movement whatsoever. We got to take a break here in a second. But I want to see movement from Mike Johnson in the House of Representatives to start shaking these courts up. I mean, Thomas Jefferson did it in his presidential term. He He did a bill that disestablished some of the courts so that he could reappoint new judges because the judges weren't following the law and following the Constitution. Well, Chris, we got to take a break real quick. When we come back, we'll see another little clip, and it will be about this case specifically in Colorado. I want to get your thoughts on it.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now. And we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
Well, it's so hard to be shocked today when you see all the things happening around us, but the utter depravity of this individual, the lack of humanity, just continues to shock the conscience of the nation, and certainly should be shocking to anyone, regardless of how you feel about the conflict in the Middle East. And this is a classic terrorism case. What the evidence shows is that there was preparation, rather deadly preparation, his intention to target people over their religion, and clearly an effort to terrorize this community. So this is a lead pipe cinch of a case for terrorism. The bringing of initial charges are often placeholders for the federal government to say that they have an outstanding charge against an individual. There's often tension, or at least some coordination, between the federal government and state governments in crimes like this. There may be, frankly, less deference with regard to Boulder because it has a rather liberal record in terms of enforcement. But they have to work out together who will proceed first.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday, and we're talking with Chris Hinkle. He's a retired FBI supervisory special agent. So he's done everything from the field work, the knuckle bruising work down in the field, taking care of bad guys, and then the supervisory type work over agents himself, and understands everything that's going on really with the Bureau, the public's trust or lack of it in the Bureau, and most importantly, the Bureau's responsibilities and its focus on where it should be. And it's, in my opinion, it should be focused on cases like this more often than not when we're talking about the protection of the average American citizen, terrorism and counterterrorism. And Chris, welcome back to the show. I wanted to show that little clip there because, you know, part of this is a visa overstay, yes, but part of it is also an anti-Semitism streak that's going through this country, especially among younger people in this country right now. What do your folks tell you that you talk to all the time that are still in the Bureau and still on duty, but also have left recently, as to how the anti-Semitism challenge is being looked at by the Bureau?
Well, I don't get specifics on how the Bureau is looking at that. I did supervise the civil rights program when I came down here in the early 2000s to Jackson, Mississippi. So I've got a pretty good understanding of that. Had the opportunity actually to supervise the reopening of Mississippi burning. So the way that I look at this, and I try to explain to people, is they tend to try to give more constitutional rights, or actually give constitutional rights to those that are here that are not citizens. And that's just not the case. A simple reading of the Constitution, of looking at DOJ policy, they're not afforded the full complement of rights as private citizens do. I also am a bit concerned at individuals that don't just take the time to read the Constitution. There are certain powers given to each of the branches that the other branches do not have. And there are certain things that the executive branch can do that even the Supreme Court has ruled is not subject to judicial review. If you go back and take a look in 1948, the last time that the Supreme Court weighed in on the Alien Enemies Act, they specifically said the president is able to do this and it is not subject to judicial review. That should be it. It should be the end of the question, unless the Chief Justice Roberts and the other Supreme Court justices are willing to hear this and overturn their 1948 decision. They talk all about stare decisis and precedent. Let's stick with that. The president is allowed to do this. I really like what Marco Rubio has answered with this. He's not going to answer the questions of some judge about foreign policy and how they affect foreign policy and immigration. Those are left within the jurisdiction of the executive branch. And the Supreme Court needs to rein in those courts, but also our Congress people need to. You and I have had this conversation here before about even on our own elected representatives. The question I have when I hear a lot of them, and you've seen them out on the campaign trail right now, embracing, engulfing themselves, cloaking themselves in the successes of Donald Trump with the executive orders. And they're saying, I stand with him shoulder to shoulder. Well, where were you the last 4 years? A lot of these things could have been addressed then. But I think the ship's going to be righted. We don't have a lot of time to do that. I want to see more citizens actually question their elected officials about what they have and have not done in the past, and ask them questions and follow-up questions. I hope that's going to happen. I think that's how you and I ended up coming to know each other. I started developing a reputation for the guy that would raise my hand in the back of a room of 200 people and ask a question of our elected representatives. And some of those have been, let's just say they've been avoiding those areas since I go back to see if they're going to come back so that I can ask follow-up questions.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the Alien Enemies Act because this guy in Boulder, the judges would have protected him had he been rolled up in deportation operation already, wouldn't they?
Yep. Judges need to understand, that there's that same document that all people, you and I swore to it in the military, I swore to it in the FBI, Congress swears to it, and the judge swears to it. They're supposed to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. What does that mean? It means that they're supposed to protect the liberties of the citizens of the United States from government. And if government is facilitating this criminal and illegal activity, regardless of which branch they're in, the executive, judicial, or legislative branch, they need to be held accountable for it. And I think it's time that we start holding these judges accountable. And if our Congress won't get together and either defund or just take away some of these courts, I think too many people don't understand the history of these lower courts. Like you said earlier, the Congress created those lower courts, not the Supreme Court. And the Congress can take them away. They've got immense power to do something about it. And the longer they refrain from doing something about it, it's the same thing as the Supreme Court not weighing in on it. They're going to lose credibility.
Yeah, and you brought something else up just now, and that is, why haven't our elected officials done something before now? It's not like, look, I'm a Republican, I'll admit it. Why haven't our Republican representatives here at the federal level done something to stop these judges already? I mean, look what happened to President Trump over the last 4 years. Part of that, we did have a Republican Congress at the very, very beginning of that, and we saw judges doing some crazy things even during the Trump administration. Why haven't we seen anything from these guys?
I don't know. I have not seen a party in the GOP work so hard to regain the minority. It's almost as if they prefer to be in the minority. And I'm not the only one that thinks this way. I've had some contacts, and you and I have discussed this, about some individuals that could easily fund very large campaigns that have come to me with the same concerns. But even with their vast wealth, it's very difficult to overcome the establishment that's there now that has gotten comfortable with the things that they've been given while they're in office. It's the same reason you see some of these senators like Tom Tillis, Lindsey Graham, Roger Wicker, the ones that embrace that, and they're not beholden to the constituents, they're beholden to their donors because they bring federal taxpayer dollars back to them. It's well past time for the citizens to stand up and exercise that First Amendment right that if I quizzed most people on list all of your First Amendment rights, there's one that they would miss, and that's petition and seek redress of grievances. That means stand up and ask questions of your elected representatives.
That's right. Well, I'll tell you what, I've talked to a lot of people that have been affected by January 6th, 2021, and they all know that one for sure because they feel like that their right has been violated in a lot of cases. You know, I wanted to ask you about this term, and I'm asking because I hear it from people all the time. What do you mean this guy was a lone wolf? You know, as I mentioned in the first segment, you know, even if these guys are acting alone in the moment, they've almost all touched something that is involved with a network of some sort or another, whether it be in person or digital or anything else. Why does do the locals like to assign that term to it, especially the media and the local police?
I think that comes into that ideology. How quickly in the past, before Donald Trump became president again, how quickly in the past was the assessment made that this was a lone wolf, that this individual acted alone, even with the assassination attempts on Donald Trump, though we didn't find anybody else that's connected to it. I can tell you in 25 years as a federal agent, 5 of it with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, 20 plus of it with the FBI. I never investigated a crime that the person is the only one that had anything to do with it, that had no support, no facilitation, that anybody didn't know anything about it. It was, I can't think of one, maybe a bank robbery, one bank robbery that we worked, but the majority of the cases that I worked, somebody knew what was going on. And it sounds like we're going to get a new tempo, especially from the things that Dan Bongino has said about if you assisted this person, we will find you. I guarantee you, we will find you. It is shocking. I think some people are shocked at how quickly things can be identified and people can be found. I make it in my private profession now. That's one of the selling points that I have is when some of my law firm clients are looking for somebody and they're shocked at how quickly I can put hands on somebody and get them in front of me to either talk to them, interview them, or identify them to law enforcement. And I just say, hey, listen, I spent 25 years chasing after people that didn't want to be found and knew how to keep from being found. So somebody that doesn't know I'm looking for them is pretty easy to find. But I think getting back to your point, I think we're going to see better days with the FBI. There's going to be some growing pains here. I think we're going to see a better tempo of understanding what the threats are on the ground. I like this regional concept that Kash Patel's putting into place, where we're going to be driven from threat-based from the regional threat, the local threats, and not something dictated from headquarters down as Robert Mueller brought to us.
Yeah, you know, it's just like in military operations, your best information comes from the grunt at the front is the phrase I used to use. Even in the Air Force, we have grunt security forces. And I used it in my last job in the Air Force. I was commander of the base at Kirtland Air Force Base. And my law enforcement guys, I had 600 plus of them. We created an intel section that worked with the JTTF, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, the local FBI office, and local law enforcement, obviously. And it was always where I got my best information was from somebody that was closest to an event, closest to an activity, closest to a location. And that's the way it ought to be. I never drove them to try to find something specific from my viewpoint. It was always from theirs. That's how that works. Counterintelligence and counterterrorism, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a hard concept to grasp. I mean, if I were assigned to a new office, so if I came to New Mexico, and was there in Albuquerque in a new office. And I was assigned a crime problem or a crime area. The first thing I'm going to do is sit down and look at, okay, who are the people that would have the information that would best assist me in identifying and eliminating threats before they occur. And I would go out and cultivate sources. I would cultivate informants. I would cultivate sources. I would cultivate liaison with people in the industry. And I would set up tripwires where individuals knew to call me if they saw some of the things that I was looking for. Why Robert Mueller chose to do away with that from looking at what are the field offices seeing, because your special agent in charge is going to go meet with the governor, with the attorney general, with local police chiefs, with the sheriffs. They're going to hear, here's the things, here's the problems going on in our area. But we shifted away from that out of this fear that Robert Mueller had after 9/11, and he got embarrassed in front of the CIA director with George W. Bush. If you talk to my friend Thomas Baker, who details that in his book, The Fall of the FBI, you'll see that why all of this came about. It was just a way to try to salvage some of the reputation at the time that was damaged, and trying to take the FBI as a square peg and put us in a round hole. It just didn't work at the time, but it was forced into there. And I'm glad to see that we're getting back to the FBI that I joined in the 90s under Director Free. I think you're going to see a better day. You're going to see professionalism. You're going to see agents out there looking like agents, comporting themselves as agents. You and I are old enough to look back that if you closed your eyes and you imagine what an FBI agent looked like, they're in a suit and tie. The person that's in charge of the crime scene is always in a suit. And that's who they're looking for. So I think you're going to see less and less of the polo shirts, cargo pants, and hiking boots, unless it is operationally necessary. But I think that the FBI's best days are ahead of it. I hope that the people will be patient enough and not seek this trial in the court of public opinion that when are we going to arrest the people from the Epstein case? When are we going to arrest, Chris Wray and Jim Comey and all of that? I think the approach that they're taking right now with just bringing some transparency to it and saying, here's the things that were going on. Some of those, the statute of limitations has gone past, but the citizens have a right to know. I'm heartened that they get that information out there quickly. And that is dovetailed into real-time events where you saw the SAC out in Denver go in, do a press conference, a follow-up press conference, and he has his public information person putting information out there to keep the public informed.
Yeah, exactly. If Mueller had only thought about that and remembered that if he had been paying attention to the field, there was a memo from a field agent about Islamists doing pilot training that was missed. That was the broken chain, in my opinion. Or
not learning wanting to know how to fly a plane and not caring about how to land.
Yeah. Listen more to the guys and gals in the field that are doing that work and sending information up versus paying attention to all the information coming out of the top. I think that's the right way to do it. Well, we got to take another break. When we come back, I want to get your take on a little incident with the Secretary of the Navy, Chris, that you saw, and then expand out on that topic more about the Islamist and pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas factions that are in America today. We'll be right back with Chris Hinkle on the Rob Maness Show.
All right, everybody. figure out how, if I really want to bring about change and bring about a more adaptable culture.
Up on your feet.
Hey, Gio.
Yeah.
Gio. Behind me.
All right. How wonderful, Mr. Secretary, to live in a country where people are allowed to speak their mind, ask questions of their governments, because in fact, the adversaries we're up against, whether they're the genocidal communists in Beijing or the Salafi jihadists in the Middle East, don't allow such luxuries of their own citizens. So apologies for the interruption.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday. My guest is former FBI Supervisory Special Agent Chris Hinkle, and who's now retired, and like me, is a public citizen. We're working to continue to make our communities, our towns, our cities, our state, and our country better, almost as if we were still on active duty. And Chris, that little scene there, that was the new Secretary of the Navy, Phelan. And the other individual on the stage was former Congressman Mike Gallagher, who was the first chairman of the Select Committee on the Communist Party of China before he left office. So two relatively important individuals. And I don't really want to talk about the fact that those people that are up there supporting Hamas and Palestine and those kind of things are misguided. What I wanted to talk about, though, is the relationship between defense in depth and that, because that was not defense in depth. I've protected presidents as a commander. I've protected presidents as a low-ranking enlisted Air Force EOD tech working with the Secret Service. And defense in depth is how you keep people away from the principal. And they were within arm's length, even closer to the Secretary of the Navy there. And I wanted to get your take on that and how we can improve this, because obviously that's just one small, minor, low consequence as far as outcome incident. But we've had everything from shooting the presidential candidate and hitting him, attempting to hit it, shoot him a second time, and then potentially a third after he became president going on here. What should we be thinking about as policymakers, or making recommendations or asking our representatives about as to what they're doing about how to fix it?
Well, what I don't want to see is what happened before. Remember, we had this hearing where the Secret Service, the female Secret Service director, was brought before this committee where she was berated and yelled at, and then she eventually resigned. And they took that as a win of, here, we're fixing things. We've held this person accountable and made them tap out and leave. Well, that doesn't fix the problem. I've had conversations with friends of mine in Secret Service, and you've got to change the structure, the things that are being done from the ground up. Reinforcement of the Constitution, at teaching at the law enforcement academies, at these training events. Everybody needs to start with the Constitution and work up. And from what I saw at this event, the examination of it shouldn't be just looking for somebody's head to put on a pike as the ultimate person that was responsible for the security there. It should be, who was responsible for putting this process together? You and I have enough awareness that when we walk into a room, we look around and we identify certain things. Where's the easiest exit? Who potentially would be a threat here? If I'm going to sit somewhere, I'm not going to have my back to a door or window, those types of things. It's very basic things that could have been done at this event. You've got someone in Phelan who has had incidents before where protesters have gotten close to him. You know that this is going to happen. Your threat assessment should tell you that you need to have some distance between them and what level of security is going to be there. they had to unfurl that banner before they approached the stage. That's when it should have been stopped, not when they got to the stage. When they get to the stage, it's too late.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I like your point about the headhunt thing. Although there was some ideological stuff going on, it appeared that most people saw in the Secret Service thing around the president when he was hit with the bullet, and very much concerned about that. Of course, it got overblown because politics entered it and everything, and there was a presidential election going on. But we've got to figure out how to make sure the people that are in charge of these types of protection activities, like you said, understand the basics. You know, I mean, I don't even start with an intel. What's the intelligence on the ground show me? I start with walkthrough, like you talked about. You do a simple walkthrough with the folks responsible for securing the venue, right?
And yeah, I even think what we would call the principal, which would be the Secretary of the Navy, you need to afford him some level of training so that he becomes aware of looking at his surroundings. The Secretary of the Navy easily could have gone up there and said, I don't like the fact that they're this close to the stage. Let's block off these seats. You know, ask questions about what level of security that you have. Those are some things that if you make them aware, they can look into it themselves when they get there and start asking questions and refuse to go forward if they think that it might be an unsafe environment. I'll be curious to see how this comes out. Is this going to be more of our elected representatives parroting our concerns in the media, where we're going to see them on Fox News and CNN talking about, oh, well, this should have never happened. I'm going to get to the bottom of it. I'm as outraged as you are. Or they're going to hold more hearings where they're going to bring people up, they're going to berate them, and they're going to put on theater. But what happens in the end? Nothing. Nothing.
Yeah, I'd like to see one time somebody come out and say, we're going to look at this event because here are the issues. We have to be transparent with you. This is a national security issue. The man who chaired the Chinese Communist Party Select Committee investigating the CCP within the United States, and it's declared unrestricted warfare on us, was on the stage. He's very important to their operatives to shut him up, slow him down, disrupt what he's doing. And the Secretary of the Navy, who is sworn to build the most ships of any Secretary of the Navy, the President of the United States calls him in the middle of the night, he says, build more ships, build more ships. That directly impacts the Chinese, and that connection between the Palestinian supporters, Islamists, and the Chinese Communist Party. We're going to look at all that and conduct an investigation. And oh, by the way, we're going to put, I don't know, maybe the FBI's National Security Division is going to be in charge of this counterintelligence investigation, and we're going to set up an interagency task force that they're going to lead. That's what I'd like to see, because nothing's going to get done in a committee in Congress.
Yeah, I think you're going to have some of the heads of these law enforcement agencies stand up and take ownership of this. With the Butler, Pennsylvania site, I was asked a number of times about that situation. And I noticed when Chris Wray was testifying about it, he talked about, different lanes that people were in, that, okay, well, the Secret Service is investigating this, the locals are investigating this. No, you need an agency in charge that is the focal point of all investigative information coming in. And if the Naval Criminal Investigative Services doesn't have the resources to address this and analyze it, yes, bring somebody in from the FBI. As many hits as the FBI has taken over the years under the failed leadership of Comey, Wray, Mueller, Strzok, Page, I can go on. The agents that are on the ground are still the best of the best of the best. It's why when Jim Comey, after he went and was showing off his seashell collection and was brought to the Washington field office to be interviewed, the first thing that I said, please don't let a supervisor or somebody in executive management conduct that interview just because it happens to be the director. You want a seasoned, experienced, street level agent sitting in that room. Same thing I said when I was in the FBI and Hillary Clinton was brought in to be interviewed, and it was executive management. She was allowed to bring in her attorney, And nothing really got accomplished there. I said, it's easy. Have me, maybe one other agent as a note taker, and Hillary Clinton sitting in a room, and let's have a chat. She can either answer the questions or not, but you're going to get more out of that from a person that's experienced at doing it. And I agree with you. If the FBI is somebody that needs to be brought in to fully examine that, let them do it. They've got the experience, they've got the resources, they can get it done in quick fashion. Same thing with the Butler, Pennsylvania site. That investigation should have been wrapped up in about 2 weeks. I could have taken five agents there and wrapped that up.
It's about building the public's confidence back in our institutions. I mean, we're talking about just the FBI at this point, but every institution involved in something like this. That's kind of why I rattled them all off. It's because we have the capability, we have the people with the capability in those offices and can get that done. We got to take our last break, and that last segment is exactly that, Chris. I want to talk in depth more about rebuilding America's confidence in the FBI. So I can look at the FBI and see the one that I saw when I looked at, I don't know, the old days, ties and suits and the untouchables, that kind of FBI. That's what we need, and we need it right now. We'll be right back with Chris Hinkle.
Hello, I'm Brandon
House. A little
House.
hiccup there, but we got to straighten that pretty quick.
Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, well, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com, worldviewtalk.com.
I just want to be crystal clear on this. I am not asking anyone to believe me. I'm telling you what's there and what isn't.
Right.
There is nothing in the file at this point on the Epstein case, and there's going to be a disclosure on this coming shortly. We are working through there is video. That is something the public does not.
There's video of him killing himself.
No, not the actual act, but the entire MCC Bay, it was only one camera. There's video that when you look at the video, and we will release, that's what's taken a while on this, we are working on cleaning it up to make sure you have an enhanced, and we're going to give the original so you don't think there were any shenanigans. You're going to see there's no one there but him.
Right.
There's just
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday. My guest today is retired Supervisory Special Agent Chris Hinkle of the FBI. And Chris, I think this is critically important. As you said, Dan Bongino as the Deputy Director and Cash, I think they make a good team, especially with Bongino. I mean, he's trying to be as honest and transparent as they come. And he's being very vocal about what he can and is not able to talk about at what time, but that he wants to get everything out in the open. That's going to go a long way to rebuilding trust, right?
I agree. The transparency, the looking the part, acting the part, speaking from professionalism, those are things that I've been espousing for years. Even the last few years I was in the FBI, when we had a propensity of some of the younger agents that spent most days in polo shirts and cargo pants and in hiking boots. I'm like you. I'm old school. There's a reason that you wear the suit. That is the uniform of an FBI agent. And I just had this conversation with Chris Piota, who is a retired executive assistant director of the FBI, and we shared about the same time in the Bureau. He obviously went to higher levels than I did, but we were talking about when we went through the FBI Academy in the 90s, there were certain days that you were required to wear a suit. Most of your training was done in cargo pants and a polo shirt because you were running back and forth to the range, to the gym, to things like that. But the days that we were doing professional things, such as executing fake crime scenes, executing fake interviews, executing fake interrogations while we were going through our training, we dressed the part. I carried that with me through my career, and I used to get laughed at by some of the younger agents when I would show up on a scene. If I'm going to be the lead investigator, the lead interviewer of, let's say, a subject, a child porn subject, and we're searching this person's trailer in South Mississippi, I show up on the team and I'm in a suit, and they're asking me why. I said, because that's the uniform. You want to have that level of respect. And some of the answers I would get would be, well, I don't want to put them, at unease immediately. I want to be on their level. No, it's easier to take somebody from an elevated level of tension and bring them down than it is to do the reverse. I got more headway with gangbangers and drug dealers that had experience with law enforcement when I was in the suit. When they walked in, they knew something was different. This is FB1. This is the federal agent sitting down in front of you. And I think once we get back to that tempo, you notice, I don't think I've seen Dan Bongino out of a suit since he's been the FBI deputy director. I think there may have been some pictures when he went down to test his mettle in the gym with some of our offensive and defensive tactics instructors, which from what I hear humbled him a little bit. It's not MMA when you're down there. MMA has a referee, and somebody will pull the bad guy off of you before they beat you to death. That doesn't happen on the streets. It's a life and death situation. But I think you're going to see more confidence as we get back to the professionalism, the diligence, the transparency of actually talking the talk and walking the walk. And I'm happy to see that that's making a comeback.
Yeah, I am too. This next question, I mean, this is a tough question for somebody that's done a whole career in the Bureau, but, we keep seeing reporting about specific positions still being filled by individuals that did such and such. I'll give you the latest example is the guy that leads the Richmond office that was responsible for the anti-Catholic, traditional Catholic extremist memo. He's still in position. What is I guess, with what kind of speed can the Bureau move to shift personnel out of positions like that individual to reinstill the faith of the public? Because I don't think the public will ever accept that individual continuing to be in charge of that office for as long as he lives and as long as they exist. And I know that's a challenge because we've seen other examples of it since Cash and Dan took over. But it's something that's got to be addressed. How do you expect the Bureau is going to address that?
Again, through transparency of putting the information out there. If you take enough time to look at the chain of events, what the information was, and dealing with Norfolk and that Catholic memo that came out, I think you'd have a different understanding of it. I think that Cash and Dan have, and it feels odd to call them Cash and Dan. I'm still old school. It should be director and deputy director, but to give them the opportunity to assess the situation. And if they're leaving that person in place, there's a reason for it. I just had that similar circumstance with the ascension of Stephen Jensen as the assistant director in charge of the Washington field office. And I came out and defended Stephen Jensen. I worked with him down in Jackson. I know the mettle of the man, and a lot of the things that they were saying about him, trying to say that he was the J6 czar, that he basically ran the show on going after citizens. In a lot of cases, from my experience and my observation, there were a lot of due process rights that were violated with the things that the FBI and DOJ were doing at the time. But I had those tough conversations with people in Director Patel's circle, and was assured that there was a reason that Stephen Jensen was vetted and put into that position to lead to be the assistant director in charge the Washington field office, and the assistant directors in Los Angeles, New York, and Washington field, they report directly to the deputy director. There isn't a phase of going through an executive assistant director under this regional concept. They report directly to Dan Bongino. So Dan Bongino and Kash Patel had the opportunity to vet this individual. And I was told he's in place for a reason. It's a specific reason, and that reason will become known soon. There's been some indications of things that I think that might be in the media. I'm not going to point out what those are right now. I'm going to let them bring that information to light. But I think the transparency is the best way to go, to give a full accounting of what went on with that memo. Is that the top priority right now, providing that information out to the public? No, it's not, and it shouldn't be, because there are real world threats that the FBI is having to address on a daily basis. I mean, heck, we just had to surge resources out to Denver to help out there. So you've got to keep track of the real world things. You've got to handle the things, the malfeasance that occurred over the last 15 years in the FBI. And about 99% of that was from the upper level executive management. If you recall, even before Kash Patel became director, there were about 6 or 8 executives that were shown the door. And the fastest way to do that, instead of firing them, was to say, you serve at the pleasure of the director. This Friday, you need to retire. If you don't retire, you're going to be demoted and move somewhere else. That's happening right now. You just had 2 more SACs given that option, and they chose to retire.
Absolutely. Well, I look forward to the director and the deputy director being more transparent on a couple of those guys, because I don't think the American people are going to be satisfied until they get some answers on it. It's just one of those things, even with the priorities on it. Well, we got a hand up in our live audience. I haven't had a chance to take a question yet. Let's do that before we get to the end of the show. Got about 30 seconds. Shell is the host over there. Go ahead, Shell.
Sir, we have Cookie.
Good afternoon. My question is, what do you attribute to the rise of the violence against law enforcement today? It wasn't this way back 30 years ago when I started.
Well, I think there's always been violence against law enforcement. The Colonel and I are old enough to remember what went on at the Democratic National Convention back in the 60s, some of the turmoil during the Vietnam era, things like that. I think it's always been there. I think it's been inflamed, and I think some of it, you get to see more of it. It's readily accessible to you through this new media that we have over the internet. It is far more dangerous. I think that over decades of the teaching in our education system, I've had this talk with my dad, who's almost 82, about that is dovetailed into our elected representatives that tend to inflame those feelings. I think that's going to change as we get the respect back. I know when I came in the 1990s, it was an honor when people would come up to me and if they learned that I was an FBI agent, to talk to me. And that changed dramatically toward the end of my career, where even my dad was a little nervous about saying what I did for a living. But I think that the way that happens is we earn the respect back of the individuals by being professionals, strict adherence to the Constitution, and being transparent.
Absolutely right, my friend. I appreciate it. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a fantastic show. A lot of great information. Folks don't often get the opportunity to get a perspective of somebody that not only was an agent, but that was a supervisor across time frames, that had to have the experience of a lot of these things that have gone on. I definitely appreciate it. How can folks find you? And hope you'll come back again someday. Go ahead.
Well, the best way that they can find me, of course, is on X. I'm at BF Conservative, as you said, Blunt Force Conservative. And a little note out there, and you'll see it coming out here shortly. There's about 5 or 6 of us together in a little retired agents group that we've been trying to affect some change from behind the scenes over the last 5 or 6 years, and we're starting to make some headway there. And we've got the Blunt Force Conservative podcast starting now. I just had my first 2 guests this past week, and I will put those out. I will put on X when those are put out there. We're going to slowly work in, and heck, maybe one day I'll be as big as the Colonel here on the social media, but I look forward to having you on so that we can have a thorough, in-depth, candid conversation. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the people today.
Absolutely. I know my audience will share it. We'll be on the lookout for that podcast. And congratulations, Chris. I look forward to seeing what you continue to do for this great country, my friend. Well, tomorrow, folks, is Whistleblower Wednesday again, and Steve Baker of The Blaze has got some explosive investigative reporting to talk about, and it's going to be the heat, so you don't want to miss it. I'll see you then.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television